Delegates, it is fashionable in some sections of the conservative media, in some of the far right of Australian politics, and some of the far left of Australian politics, to say that Labor has had its day, that the issues upon which this movement was founded 120 years ago have by and large been accomplished, and we're in a new world. Delegates, we know that there are many issues in Australia which still require the energy and the passion which only the Labor Party and movement can give it to change. And there is no issue, in my opinion, which requires the energy and the mighty power of the Labor Party any more than disability, any more than disability reform. 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to become the Parliamentary Secretary for Disability Services. And I had thought, as an official of a union and an organiser, I had seen disadvantage and unfairness, and I had. But nothing prepared me for the second-class citizenship which people with disability and their families and carers, the second-class citizenship in which they live. Imagine, if you can, if you would, if we built a city with very high walls, and into that city we put 1.3 million people, that being the approximate number of people with profound and severe disability, and then into that city with high walls we put another 500,000 Australians, their families, their carers, the people who love them. And we said to the people within the walls of this city that you will have a second-class life in Australia from birth to death. If we said to nearly 2 million Australians that it being in Australia and having an impairment means you will not get an equal go in this country. The people with disability and carers know this, they understand this. Imagine if you have a beautiful baby and at about the 12-month stage, that child you love with all of your heart doesn't start developing and growing in the way that you'd hoped. Imagine the impact that has upon you and your partner. What does this mean? Perhaps you will feel a sense of optimism, it'll be all right. Then you have to try and find, though, a GP who understands what's going on. Then you have to get a referral to a specialist. And then you get the news that your beautiful child is still your beautiful child who you love and would do anything for, but you're going to have some challenges because your child has an impairment. Then imagine the ugly, lonely search for childcare, for kindergarten, for therapy, for early intervention, to get the vehicle modified. Imagine if you walk down the street and your child's got a high level of autism and is acting up, and other parents look at you and say, why are you a bad parent? You cannot control your child. When all it is your child is beautiful but has autism. And imagine if you have a child with a physical impairment and you're standing in the park and some other unthinking Australian says to that parent, why did you have this child? And imagine if you have 2 children with a disability and some unthinking, ignorant fool says to you, why did you have your second child? Then imagine you search for a primary school. You have to make the choice between special school or mainstream. Imagine if you are made to feel like you are a bully because you want your child to get the integration support that your child deserves. And then you head to the search for secondary school. You know, once upon a time, hundreds of years ago, we were taught that the world was flat and that if you sailed too far to the edge of the world, you would fall off. We've now learnt that the world is not flat. But if you are a person with an impairment, or if you are a parent of a child with an impairment, your world is still flat. At each point in the cycle of life, you sail off the edge and have to start again. What is wrong with expecting that our children regardless of their impairment, can have a secondary education? What is wrong with expecting that our children can get jobs and go to university and TAFE? What is wrong with expecting you can get a wheelchair within 12 months of ordering one? What is wrong if your child has a spinal condition, which means they need a special bed, and that the bed takes so long that in fact by the time the bed arrives, the child has grown and you need a new bed? How in this federation of ours, when you move from one state to another, do you have to hand your equipment back before you can move? How is it in this country that if you are in a motor car collision in Western Australia and one car has Victorian licence plates and one car has West Australian licence plates, how is it that if it's a terrible injury, some person suffers acquired brain injury, has to be fed with a straw, if they suffer severe cervical injury, spinal injury, how is it that the person, if you happen by fate to have a car registered in Victoria or New South Wales, you will get a reasonable level of lifetime care? But in Western Australia, and it's not just Western Australia, because no one can prove fault, you're stuck in the residual system. How is it that the manner of your impairment, or the method of your impairment, the manner of your impairment determines the level of your care? This is a Labor issue. When do we allow 2 million people in exile in our own country, and when do we take down the walls of the city surrounding them and say, please join the rest of our society? Now, this country is not too poor. We are an imaginative, we are a generous, we are a rich country. I believe that if you're born Australian or you immigrate to Australia, there's a certain deal you get. We are very fortunate, not just with the commitment of our Prime Minister, but with the commitment of Minister Macklin and Parliamentary Secretary McLucas and all of the other Cabinet Ministers. We understand that there are no cheap options to reform disability. But I do believe this movement can be the conscience of the country. We are the movement who fought for the age pension. We are the movement who fought for the minimum wage. We are the movement who fought for Medicare and superannuation. And it is time to add a fifth pillar towards the basic safety net of this country. In politics, one is frequently cautioned against raising expectations. People with disability and carers, they don't need their expectations raised. They know the lives they lead. They understand the fundamental formula, that an impairment is just one feature of the personality of the person. And they refuse to be defined by their impairment. What disables people in Australia is not the impairment, it is the barriers that the community puts in place. It is what disables people is a lack of power and a lack of money. The principle of a national disability insurance scheme addresses the idea of a lack of resource. I do not look at a person in a wheelchair or a person with an intellectual disability or an ageing carer, an ageing parent. I do not look at them and say, you are charity, you are a consumer, you are a voter. But there is a second equation which Labor people understand. It is not enough just to have money, you also need power. There is a challenge here for the Labor Party. Are we the party who will empower people with disability? Are we the party who will enrich the lives of people with disability? Some people say that disability is not a sexy topic. Some people say it is too hard. Some people say that you can't fund disability. They paint the picture of the metaphor of the well, and you lean over the well and you drop the coin in the well, and as you listen, you never hear it hit the bottom, as if disability is an unfundable solution, an unfundable problem. What this government has done, and this Prime Minister has done, and this ministry has done, is we have now said that when you drop that coin in the well, you can hear it hit the bottom. It is not a cheap solution, but it is a possible solution. This government and this movement at this time has said that we can do something about disability fundamentally, which will leave the place better than we found it. This is the generation of Labor to whom the responsibility falls to be able to answer a promise to ageing parents of beautiful adult children with disabilities. At the moment, when we talk to these people, and some of them are here, I cannot guarantee that if they are no longer able to look after their child, that their child will be all right. But I believe that we are capable, with the work being done, that we are able to look at the ageing parents in their 80s and their 90s, hanging on for one reason, to make sure that their adult child is okay. I believe that we should one day be able to make the promise to those parents, it's okay, your kids are going to be all right.